Hello, welcome to Jason the Old Millennial. My name is Jason. I'm speaking to you here in my basement in the great state of Kansas, and today I am doing a video on top 20 movies of the 2000s. So I'm going to cover the decade of the 2000s. I did a video already doing the top 20 favorite movies of the 2010s, 2010s, and so now I'm going down to the 2000s, and I'm just covering 5 movies per video. So this first video I'm doing is going to cover number 20 through number 16, and just say a little bit about the year 2000s, or the decade. I graduated in 2002 from high school, graduated from college in 2008, so it was definitely a big decade for me, finishing up my high school and my teenage days, and then going into my 20s and finishing up my college years there, and finishing that and starting a career and all that, or trying to start a career afterwards. So it was a decade of my youth. It's a decade that I probably went to the movies more than any other decade. I went to the movies quite a lot during that time period. Of course, once I got a job, I was able to, I was able to afford my own tickets and all that. I was able to go to the movies a lot more often, and I loved going to the movies. That was one of my favorite things to do, and I did it quite often in that time period. So this was an interesting decade, pretty good decade. Maybe the decade I've seen the most movies in. We had some huge franchises come out in this decade. I think technology was really going to a point where CGI work is really, really good, and we were getting a lot more fancy sci-fi movies with a lot more CGI characters, and we were able to do a lot more fantasy type stuff that we couldn't do before. Like Lord of the Rings, the trilogy came out in this time period. Huge hit, huge epic hit that really paved the way, I think, for more fantasy, and to keep, uh, getting better technology to do more fantasy, because Lord of the Rings was seen as a book that was unfilmable. That there's no way you can film a book with these many characters and creatures and this world. Anyway, so it really opened up a lot, I think, with the Lord of the Rings franchise. Star Wars franchise, the prequels were also coming during this period. I think Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. So we're ending the prequel trilogy, which was pretty big at the time. And then you had the Harry Potter franchise, I believe, was starting on this period with Sorcerer's Stone and all that, and a lot of Harry Potter movies during this decade, and that was a huge franchise. Made, of course, the books were hugely, hugely popular. Movies made tons and tons of money at the box office. So, like I said, a lot of fantasy sci-fi movies really getting huge during this time period. Chronicles of Narnia came out with some movies also. Like I said, just huge for fantasy. Also, superhero movies are really starting up. I've, in the early 2000s, we had the X-Men and the Spider-Man movies. The first Spider-Man movie, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies, making tons of money at the box office. And then we get the Marvel Cinematic Universe starts in 2008 with Iron Man, and so that kind of starts one of the biggest franchises of all time. So it's just beginning at the end of the decade. Also, the Batman trilogy starts in this time period with Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, which was a huge, huge hit. Made tons of money at the box office. So yeah, so it was, so looking at that, there's going to be some fantasy sci-fi movies on my list. I do like fantasy and sci-fi. I do like big epic movies. Anyway, so you're going to see a lot of those on my list. Anyways, and so saying that, I'll go with number 20 on my list, which I already talked about a little bit here. It is Batman Begins. I got the Blu-ray here that I have. This came out in 2008. Like I said, 2008, pretty big year for superhero movies. Batman Begins, and I'll talk about another movie actually here pretty soon that came out in 2008. But this is probably my favorite Batman movie, which is probably a surprise. Most people will say The Dark Knight is their favorite. I actually prefer this movie. This kind of begins a new franchise. We already had Batman with Tim Burton Batmans, Joel Schumacher Batmans, and now we even have, way back in the day, the Adam West Batman TV series and movie. But we got really one of the best origin stories I think we've ever had in a superhero movie. And I think origin stories are really hard to do, because you always have to start with the person being kind of normal and just being a normal person somewhat, and then you have to watch how do they get their powers, or how do they get to be a superhero. So there's a little bit slow moving at the beginning usually of an origin story, where because you really want to see them become the superhero. That's the interesting part of the character or the movie. So sometimes there's some boring slow moments where we're trying to get into how he gets into that role. And so it's very hard to do, I think, a good origin story. And we've had so many that it kind of gets boring. Anytime a new superhero movie comes out, it's kind of like, oh, another superhero, and I have to learn how they became a superhero. It's somewhat more fun once they get to be the superhero and we just get to see them in action and get to see a story that way. But this does a very well job, and Batman's one of my favorite superheroes of all time. No surprise, he's one of the most popular for sure, maybe the most popular. Great character, because I grew up watching the animated series and watching the other Batmans, the Tim Burton Batmans and all that. But I think this does a real good job explaining how Batman became Batman. Very well done, very well paced. Even the beginning has some good action in there where we see him get trained as like a ninja in this like mountains in Nepal or somewhere by Liam Neeson's character. So we get to see that, okay, Batman is great because he trained as a secret like ninja group, so he knows how to be stealthy and knows how to sneak into places and grab people and stuff like that because of his training. Also, he's also a good hand-to-hand combat fighter. So that does a good job kind of explaining his backstory there. And then it also explains how, because he's the son of a billionaire, he kind of part owner of this company, Wayne's Enterprises. And so Wayne Enterprises has a section that's all about like advanced weaponry that they were like making for the military. And so that explains a lot of how he gets a lot of his weapons and a lot of his gadgets. It's because there's a whole section of this, technology. And so that explains a lot of like, oh, he has a grappling hook because they use, or how he got the bat suit. The bat suit was like a prototype, military like suit. So he got this really cool, suit that he turns into the bat suit. He has a cape because that helps him glide, because sometimes he's jumping from building to building and he needs something to help him, so he just doesn't hit real hard. That it helps him glide into places. Helps him move around a little better. So it explains why he has the cape. Pretty much everything that he has is pretty much explained through this, and I think it's such a good job of building that character to where you're like, wow, everything makes sense. Even the bat signal, which is just Gordon putting a bad guy, I think Falcone, on a spotlight, and then you can see the image in the sky, and he gets the idea for the bat signal. So that kind of makes it. So I love how they come up with all these ideas of how Batman becomes Batman anyway. So I thought they did a real good job. Of course, yeah, great character, good story, great cast. Of course, Christian Bale, I think, was a great Batman, probably the best Batman we've had so far. And it's just great actors like Michael Caine and Morgan Freeman. I said Liam Neeson. Cillian Murphy is really great as a Scarecrow. Yeah, so that's why Batman Begins, one of my favorite superhero movies. Best Batman movie, I think. So we go to number 19. Is a sequel called Hellboy 2: The Golden Army. The Hellboy, the first movie, I wasn't a big fan of. Like, I liked the character Hellboy. I thought it was great in the first one. The first movie was very, I don't know, it's very satanic, kind of. I didn't like the satanic vibes, really. And the bad guy, and it was kind of gruesome. I don't know. It was a little too gruesome for me in a way. I didn't enjoy it as much. This was such a big improvement on the first one. They had kind of a love triangle in the first one. That character totally disappears that they introduced in the first movie, which I thought was a good idea. But this is a really good action sci-fi movie. Guillermo del Toro, of course, directed this. He's such a great visual director. The makeup work is just really great. Love that. Love a lot of practical effects. They built a lot of the stuff on there instead of just CGI effects. The sets are really great. He has a really great creative imagination when it comes to building sets and characters and all that. And I really enjoy in this movie. The troll mark is just really amazing to see how all the stuff they built for that. Um, yeah, and the action's really good, and I love the Hellboy's such a great character. It's one of my favorite characters I've ever seen. Of course, he's this kind of demon-like looking character coming from like alternate dimension, and he's kind of supposed to be kind of a scary looking guy, but he's raised by a good doctor or a scientist, I believe a German scientist in the first movie, and he learns to be a good person or a good whatever he is, and so he's a good person, whatever I'll say, person, good person, and so he looks scary. He's very gentle actually when he needs to be, but he's very tough, very tough. He's not scared of anything, which I love those kind of characters. He's very wisecracking, very sarcastic humor, very fun character overall, and like I said, not afraid to jump into action, which I like a lot. Very brave character. Um, and Ron Perlman as Hellboy is probably best performance. Uh, Even though he's under all that makeup, he does such a good job of bringing out the character. And overall story's got kind of interesting, fantasy story to it, and good bad guy and good climax scene, a lot of action. Yeah, a lot of humor too. Love the humor. Very funny movie. Yeah, I have to one of my favorite action sci-fi movies of that time period. Number 18, I already talked about Batman Begins. Another superhero origin movie that I think is really well done is Iron Man, which also came out in 2008. Hellboy 2 came out in 2008 too, so the first three movies all came out in 2008, so pretty good year for movies, in my opinion. I said Iron Man's it started off the MCU, one of my favorite franchises, the greatest superhero franchise we've had, I think, at this point. I don't know if it'll ever be outdone. They try with Justice League. I don't think it can ever be as good as the Avengers and all that. But this was such a great kind of surprise hit for me when I saw it in the theater. Iron Man's not like one of the number. He's not as big as Batman, not as big as X-Men or Spider-Man or Superman. He's not one of the big names. And Robert Downey Jr. at the time, I don't think was a big name actor at the time. So I was a bit surprised to see Robert Downey Jr. in a superhero movie and playing Iron Man, which wasn't that big of a superhero, and made one of the great superhero movies. Not only the trilogy, but the Avenger movies and all that. Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man's been in so many movies. He's one of my favorite characters now of all superheroes. And a lot of that's because Robert Downey Jr. is so good. I mean, this is one of the best castings I've ever seen. Totally nails the character. Very funny. He's this billionaire, kind of like Batman or Bruce Wayne. He's a billionaire, but he's more of a playboy. Drinks a lot, parties a lot of different women, and so Robert Downey Jr. is so good. But yet the character has a really great arc and has some good dramatic moments too that I think Robert Downey Jr. does such a good job in. And he's so good at going between humor and serious scenes. And I love the arc of the character being this kind of this playboy, not really caring about anything, to then he has like a life goal of, I need to stop, terrorists basically. And he builds a suit so that he can go over, and stop terrorists that are using his weapons from Stark's Industries. And so I like that he, really has this, very important purpose in his life that he changes kind of because of that. And so, yeah, it's a great moment in this movie. And, yeah, just a very fun movie. Action's okay, not the best maybe. I think most of it was just really great. I think the pacing's really good in the movie. I love the use of editing to flashbacks and going back and forth. I think it was really well done. Yeah, so I think it's a really great movie, Iron Man, with Robert Downey Jr. Okay, so now we're going to change a little bit from superhero movies and action movies to one of my favorite, I don't know what you call it, musical, some call it musical, it's kind of an indie movie called Once. There's the two main characters, Glenn Hansard and Marketa Oglova, I believe her name is. This came out in 2007, so this was the kind of movie that, kind of a low budget, I say indie movie from Ireland. I don't know if it came out in many theaters, but I happened to hear about it, and it intrigued me. And I saw a clip of them singing a song that sounded pretty good, so I remember going to see it and just being blown away by it, how good it was. Mostly because the music. The music is just so fantastic. The two main leads are musicians, not actors. Glenn Hansard's from Ireland. Great, he has a band, but he's so good just by himself with just a guitar, acoustic guitar, and just him. He has one of the best voices. Like, I love his ability to almost kind of scream but be on pitch. I mean, he gets very, very loud singing, but yet he sings like these high pitched, really perfect notes that I haven't heard from anybody else. So it's just a great dynamic singer and songwriter. He writes pretty much all the songs in the movie, and there's a lot of songs on the movie. And Markéta Glova is from Czech Republic, piano player, singer, and sings along with him on some of the songs. They sound great together on some of their songs. It's called a musical. I guess you can call it a modern musical maybe. It's not a musical in the sense that people just all of a sudden break out the song, and everybody just happens to know the same song, the same dance moves, and they're doing this big number. It's nothing like that. It's just two musicians who you'll see them, sing a song by themselves, or they go to a recording studio at one point and sing some songs, or there's some songs sung as there's like montages of the movie happening, in the background, that kind of stuff. But the music just absolutely fantastic, and this might be a case of what the music just is my kind of music that I absolutely love. Very emotional type singing, a lot of acoustic guitar and piano. I really love that dynamic, more kind of I call folk singing or indie folk music. So yeah, and the story's not bad. I enjoy the fact that the two main characters, normally your two main characters are going to fall in love and in together. This isn't a story really of falling in love. The two characters I think do love each other in a way, but more as friends and not as like a couple. And then at the end they kind of go their separate ways, but yet there's a sense of they'll never forget each other. They made a big impact, positive impact on each other's lives, and I kind of enjoy that aspect of it. You don't see in movies very often. I think it's true in life that you do meet some people and you don't, fall in love with them. Nothing happens, but yet you can see that they have a positive impact on your life anyway. So I enjoy that. So yeah, Once, one of the great music movies. And then the last movie on my list today, number 16. My favorite comedic actor of this decade for sure, had a great decade, was Will Ferrell. A huge Will Ferrell fan, of course, from Saturday Night Live. And then when he made it back, when he broke out into movies, I think he's had such a great run. And there's a lot of movies I love of his during this time period. But when I thought about the movie that I watch probably the most, and the movie that makes me laugh the most, is Elf. Kind of a Christmas classic now. And I saw it in the theater, and I thought it was okay. I wasn't as big a fan, but over the years, I see it every Christmas. Of course, it's on TV, and I've watched it so many times, of course, around Christmas time, and I laugh every time I watch this movie. I just laugh and laugh, even though I know what's going to happen. It's that kind of movie, and that's a pretty good movie, good comedy. If you can see it multiple times and still find everything pretty funny, and find something even new that's funny that you didn't think before. And this is one of those movies. It's kind of it's a family kind of Christmas movie. It's directed by Jon Favreau. It was really the first movie that Will Ferrell got to be the lead in. Up to this point, he was doing more supporting roles, like I forget the name of the movie. Right before this, but he did more supporting, and he's very good in supporting roles or small parts in comedies. But this was the first one. I feel like it was like all the pressure was on him to deliver this movie. He was number one on the call sheet. He was the one that had to carry the movie, and he did such a great job. And I think we all knew he probably would, because he was one of the funniest people coming out Saturday Night Live I've ever seen in my life. So great at creating characters, and this is a really funny character that he created. Very childish character, very naive, man-child. Doesn't understand the world. He's a human being that grew up in the elf world. Then he goes back to the human world, but he only knows the elf world. So it's a fish out of water kind of thing that's very funny, that he does very well. And Will Ferrell just knows how to make you laugh in each scene. Like, I feel like there's some scenes where he knows how to yell and get a laugh. He'll yell this line, be totally funny. He knows that that's going to be funny. Then he'll do another scene where he'll whisper a line, and that's funny. And it's like, I don't know how he knew to yell at this point to make it funny and whisper at this point to make it funny, but Will Ferrell just knows how to be funny all the time. He just, maybe they did different takes on stuff, but he just has a great sense of how he can make people laugh, I think. And part of it's probably great editing from Jon Favreau as well. But yeah, this is, to me, it's one of the best Christmas movies. One of my favorite Christmas movies I watch every year, and one of my favorite comedies now. Even though, like I said, it is silly at times, it is unrealistic, the comedy. And I think that bothered me when I first watched it, but as I've watched it so many times, I've kind of learned to just, go, okay, I accept that this is a very unrealistic plot. These things would not happen this way. None of this makes sense, but I was able to say, okay, I can accept that and just enjoy the movie as it is, as a silly comedy, as an unrealistic human character who thinks he's an elf. And if you do that, I think it's just a funny movie. In fact, I've talked to people who don't like Will Ferrell movies, but they like this movie. It's probably one that reaches the most people, I guess, like I said, because it's a more family-friendly movie, unlike some of his others. So that's why I put Elf. It's probably my favorite Will Ferrell movie. And like I said, there's a bunch of them. Talladega Nights, Anchorman are absolutely hilarious. Blades of Glory, I love. A lot of his work with Adam McKay is so funny. He's so good. But I'll do that. Elf as my favorite Will Ferrell movie of this decade of comedies. So that's my first video, 20 through 16. Favorite 20 movies of the 2000s. So thank you for watching, and thank you for liking and subscribing. I really appreciate all of you and all your support.